This is Carlus Gupton, and I'm like most of you in that right now I am safer at home. I'm doing everything I can to observe all of the social distancing guidelines, not only for myself, but also to be a good citizen so that I am not potentially exposing someone else to a virus that I don't know whether I have or not, or certainly not to pick it up from someone who may not be aware that they're carrying it. It's a very unusual time, and every one of us are experiencing some measure of upheaval as a result of it. And it's hard for us to figure out. Just yesterday, Ann and I were outside doing some work in the yard, which is supposedly still allowed. We were spreading straw. We spent quite a bit of time doing it. And I took a moment to go across the way and visit with some of my neighbors. And I thought of, how careful we were being to observe social distance and not knowing exactly how to carry on the conversation, how close was too close. I thought it was really funny that we would get close and then we'd back off and then we'd get close and then we would back off, kind of like a little gathering of porcupines. We'd get together and feel each other's quills and then back off and so on, because it was such a new habit for us. It was just sort of that slow dance that we were doing with each other during that entire time. And it was such an unusual moment where we were wanting to relate as human beings normally do, but we had to do it by a different set of rules. And it was really hard. And that's just one instance of the colossal sense of loss and change that each of us is experiencing now. And part of the difficulty is we don't know how long it's going to be. I mean, there's some who predict it'll be a short period of time, others who are predicting a much longer period, but none of us really knows. Most of us are on the receiving end of information from people who know a great deal more about this than we do. I know that's the case for me. And I'm just trying to abide by the rules as they're being set out. But that doesn't make it any easier for me, because right now I'm just sitting in my house in front of a computer screen and making a video that hopefully will be of help to folks. But normally in my day-to-day existence, I'm interacting with my colleagues and my students, and I'm just not able to do that now. I'm reminded of a conversation that a friend of mine had with the famed philosopher Elton Trueblood many years ago. And he just asked Dr. Trueblood this question, that if you could say just one word or one brief phrase that you think is a major key in people being able to live not only just a productive life generally, but to be able to make sense of and live a meaningful Christian existence in the world, what would it be? And my friend was surprised that Dr. Trueblood didn't even wince, he didn't hesitate. He just said, and. He just said the word and. And my friend asked, what do you mean by that? He says, well, life is both joy and sorrow, pain and pleasure. And he went on to list a number of other dichotomies where you have one experience and then the opposite experience on the other end. And what he said was that the most unhappy and least adjusted people in life and in faith are those who either expect most of life, if not all of life, to be on the positive end of those polarities, or they have a tendency to think that most of life is over on the negative end of the polarities, the most undesirable end. He says the healthiest people are those who have learned how to live in the and to be able to accept the full reality. There's a text of scripture that I think reflects that. It's in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, where the Ecclesiastes writer said there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heaven. And most of us know this. If we don't know it by heart, we at least know a little bit of what he's about to say, where he gives this list: a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. And then listen to this one, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Boy, we're experiencing that now, aren't we? And a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak. And we think we'd like some of our folks on social media to observe that one. A time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Now, most of the time we understand that to be a natural rhythm of life. But where we do have the most difficulty is when our experiences sort of force us, maybe even just push us, maybe even violently or quickly to the negative end of most of these polarities. Maybe a time like we're in right now, where it's hard for us to see the positive end of things. But in reality, that's not the case. There are a number of things among us that are both positive as well as negative if we'll just look for them. There are still children being born. There are still things being planted and not simply uprooted. Or if you're like me, and when you were doing your work out in the yard as we were yesterday, we both uprooted and we planted at the same time, but that's still going on, right? And there's also the time to weep and a time to laugh. Most of us are experiencing some measure of grief as a result of all of these situations. And honestly, we should, but at the same time, we should take time to laugh, to have a sense of humor. And whether you're on social media or whatever it might be, which has become a fairly popular entity right now because people are flocking to it, sometimes it's good just to laugh. There is the time to mourn, certainly, because we're experiencing significant loss, and a time to dance, and that's still happening. A time to scatter stones, a time to gather them, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. Who knows how we're interpreting that these days? But we're still searching and giving up, keeping and throwing away, tearing and mending, being silent and speaking, practicing the love we should toward others. There are many of these polarities where we are indeed experiencing both the negative and the positive, but because everything is so upended, we have a tendency to see them as being primarily on the negative end. And again, going back to Trueblood's word, and the genius is in the and right now. To realize that life is not totally negative in the midst of so many things that are nowhere near as positive as we typically experience them. We have to have this capacity to welcome the and to live within it. And fortunately, we're given some other help in the next few verses of that same text of scripture from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, where the Ecclesiastes writer says, "What do workers gain from their toil?" He says, "I've seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know there's nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, and that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God." But listen especially to this last verse. "I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it. Nothing can be taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him." Now, isn't it encouraging to know that even with all of the uncertainties that we're experiencing in this life, that there are opportunities to embrace, and there is the certainty of God understanding this reality in ways beyond our capacity, and his ability to reach into our lives and to provide that sense of constancy, that sense of stability, that core sense that life can be lived meaningfully regardless of where we find ourselves. And I want to camp out on that text that he's made everything beautiful in its time. Right now, what we're experiencing is a challenge. Now, most of us at the same time are trying to see the inherent opportunities and the situations that can be seized for the good. We're spending more time with our families, perhaps connecting even more meaningfully with friends because we value them so deeply. Now, a lot of the connection is virtual, but the fact that we are wanting to get together virtually, doesn't that underscore the significance that we place on these relationships? Just this past week, we have a little Sunday after church lunch group that gets together quite often, and a text came out to us here not long ago that we're missing each other. We would love to be able to spend the time that we normally do sitting at the restaurant table, but we can't. So we're going to Zoom each of us at our tables, eating together and carrying on conversation. There are any number of ways of going about this sort of thing, and observing the same kind of valuable experiences that we've had before, all the while understanding that if we place ourselves in God's perspective, we place ourselves in his economy, in his long view of things, that he's still in control. And that life, even though in the end, has significant meaning. God bless you as you go through this time. And may you find the help and the support and the grace and the peace to weather this very challenging time.
Hi, I'm Melissa Lancaster, and I want to welcome you to Praise and Harmony TV. Here on this app or website, whichever you're using, you'll find countless videos on how to sing, vocal care, music theory, training for individual songs, and learning harmony parts, music videos and lyric videos for your church to stream, children's content, and so much more. We're adding new content every day, so be sure to take a look around and be sure to sign up for your 3-day free trial.